Okay. So I realize the dictionary is going to be a little bit more difficult to start. So I'm not going to start the dictionary project yet. Um, I think what I'm going to do instead is do a typing. I think I'll do a type transcription. So when I do Instacart and transcription, instead of transcribing the Bible right now, I think I might transcribe the dictionary. That way I can get it out onto, um, I can have it, my own version in a Word document. So let's go ahead and create that now. Let's go ahead and do, do, not that. There we go. Blank. And then we'll go ahead and name it dictionary project. Okay. Oh wait, no, I don't need to do that. I'm dumb. I forgot. I have this. Oh, sorry. Hold on. Let's get down a little further. I think it's right before this. There we go. Dictionary project. Don't need to do that now. All right. All right. Well, for now, since I already committed to not doing this right now, because I need to figure out how I'm going to do it without talking. I think I could just bring the dictionary with me to like Fred Meyer or something, and I could just record my transcribing it. So my plan is to watch the transcription and then record the errors and maybe do a transcription of the audio in the comment section or something. So that way the information can just be written too. So plus it's good typing practice. It's good for the fine tuning of the muscles in the arms and stuff. I'm finding that my forearms are a lot stronger than they used to be. But so back to brainstorm 1. Yesterday I did a chapter of biology. So today I'll be doing a chapter of sociology. So without further ado, let's go ahead and open up the OpenStax website. Sociology is near the bottom. There we go. Sociology 3E. View online. Actually, I wonder if I could do this instead. Download a PDF. Go to your file. So is it actually downloaded? Let's find out. Downloads. No, it's not. So it's just a temporary download. I like that. That's nice. I'm going to start doing that. Okay, so I think I'm just going to go ahead and browse through. Let's go ahead and can I close this at all? Oh, this will be nice to have. I'm just going to go straight to chapter 1. There we go. And then let's zoom in a little bit. Let's do 150. Okay, an introduction to sociology, chapter 1. Chapter outline. What is sociology? Sorry, 1.1 is going to be what is sociology? 1.2 is the history of sociology. 1.3, the theoretical perspectives in sociology. 1.4, why study sociology? Introduction. A busy commuter train station might seem like a very individualized place. Tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands of strangers flow through with a singular purpose, to get where they need to go. Whether walking through main doors at a pace of a dozen people each second or arriving by train hundreds at a time, the station can feel a bit like a balloon being pumped too full. Throngs of people cluster in tight bottlenecks until they burst through corridors and stairways and tunnels to reach the next stage of their journey. In some stations, walking against the crowd can be a tedious, nearly impossible task, and cutting across a river of determined commuters can be almost dangerous. Things are fast, relentless, and necessary. But are those hundreds, 100,000, or half million, um, or in the case of Tokyo Shinjuku Station, 3.5 million people really acting individually? It may seem surprising, but even with those numbers, strangers from across cities can sync up on the same schedules, use the same doors, take one leg of the trip together every day before separating into different directions. After just a few months, faces can become familiar and senses can be tuned. An experienced commuter can tell where another person is going according to their pace and whatever announcement just went out. They may slow up a bit to let the other person pass or hold the door open just a bit longer than usual. Certain that someone will grab the handle behind them, many regulars don't need to check the schedule board. They sense whether a train is running late or whether a track has changed simply by the movement of the crowd. And then the customs develop: which side to walk on, how fast to go, where to stand, how much space to leave between people on an escalator. When you board early, which seat should you take? When you see someone running for the train, do you jam the closing door with your foot? How does the crowd treat people who ask for food or money? What's the risk level in telling someone to be quiet? Very few of these behaviors are taught. None are written down, but the transit hub, that pocket of constant flow, is an echo of its society. It takes on some aspects of the city and country around it, but its people also form an informal group on their own. Sociologists, as you will learn, may study these people. Sociologists may seek to understand how they feel about their trip, but be it proud or annoyed or just plain exhausted. Sociologists might study how length of commute relates to job satisfaction or family relationships. They may study the ways that conditions of a train affect attitudes about government, or how the difficulty of commuting may lead people to relocate. This understanding isn't just a collection of intersecting facts. It can influence government policy and spending decisions, government employer interventions, and healthcare practices. The work sociologists do to understand our society and the work you will do in learning about it is meaningful to our lives and our futures. 1.1: What is sociology? Learning objectives. By the end of this section, you should be able to explain concepts central to sociology, describe how different sociological perspectives have developed. What are society and culture? Sociology is the scientific and systematic study of groups and group interactions, societies and social interactions, from small and personal groups to very large groups. A group of people who live in a defined geographic area, who interact with one another, and who share a common culture is what sociologists call a society. Sociologists study all aspects and levels of society. Sociologists working from the micro level study small groups and individual interactions, while those using macro level analysis look at trends among and between large groups and societies. For example, a micro level study might look at the accepted rules of conversation in various groups, such as among teenagers or business professionals. In contrast, a macro level analysis might research the ways that language has changed over time or in social media outlets. The term culture refers to the group's shared practices, values, and beliefs. Culture encompasses a group's way of life, from routine, everyday interactions to the most important parts of group members' lives. It includes everything produced by a society, including all the social rules. Sociologists often study culture using the sociological imagination, which pioneer sociologist C. Wright Mills described as an awareness of the relationships between a person's behavior and experience and the wider culture that shaped that person's choices and perceptions. It's a way of seeing our own and the other people's behavior in relationship to history and social structure. One illustration of this is a person's decision to marry. In the United States, this choice is heavily influenced by individual feelings. However, the social acceptability of marriage relative to the person's circumstances also plays a part. Remember, though, that culture is a product of the people in a society. Sociologists take care not to treat the concept of culture as though it were alive and real. The error of treating an abstract concept as though it has a real material existence is known as reification. Studying patterns. How sociologists view society. All sociologists are interested in the experiences of individuals and how those experiences are shaped by interactions with social groups and society. To sociologists, the personal decision an individual makes do not exist in a vacuum. Cultural patterns, social forces, and influences put pressure on people to select one choice over another. Sociologists try to identify these general patterns by examining the behavior of large groups of people living in the same society and experiencing the same societal pressures. Consider the changes in U.S. families. The typical family in past decades consisted of married parents living in a home with their unmarried children. Today, the percent of unmarried couples, same sex couples, single parent, and single adult households is increasing, as well as the number of expanded households in which extended family members, such as grandparents, cousins, or adult children, live together in the family home. While 15 million mothers still make up the majority of single parents, 3.5 million fathers are also raising their children alone. Increasingly, single people and cohabitating couples are choosing to raise children outside of marriage through surrogates or adoption. Some sociologists study social facts, the laws, morals, values, religious beliefs, customs, fashions, rituals, and cultural rules that govern social life that may contribute to these changes in the family. Do people in the United States view marriage and family differently over the years? Do they view them differently than the Peruvians? Do employment and economic conditions play a role in families? Other sociologists are studying the consequences of these new patterns, such as the ways children influence and are influenced by them, and or the changing needs for education, housing, and healthcare. Sociologists identify and study patterns related to all kinds of contemporary social issues. The stop and frisk policy, the emergence of new social political factions, how Twitter influences everyday communication, these are all examples of topics that sociologists might explore. Studying part and whole. How sociologists view social structures. A key component of the social perspective is the idea that the individual and society are inseparable. It is impossible to study one without the other. German sociologist Norbert Elias called the process of simultaneously analyzing the behavior of individuals and the society that shapes that behavior figuration. Consider religion. While people experience religion in a distinctly individual manner, religion exists in a larger social context as a social institution. For instance, an individual's religious practice may be influenced by what government dictates, holidays, um, teachers, places of worship, rituals, and so on. These influences underscore the important relationship between individual practices of religion and social pressures that influence that religious experience. In simpler terms, figuration means that as one analyzes the social institutions in society, the individuals using that institution in any fashion need to be figured into the analysis. Okay. I'll save the sociology and the real world stuff for later when I do an in depth um, thing into this. All right, 1.2, the history of sociology, learning objectives. By the end of this section, you should be able to explain why sociology emerged when it did, describe how sociology became a separate academic discipline. I'm going to grab some water. Oh, that's good. All right, take my shirt off. All right. For millennia, people have been fascinated by the relationships between individuals and societies. Many topics studied by ancient philosophers and their desire to describe an ideal society are still studied in modern sociology, including theories of social conflict, economics, social cohesion, and power in a continued attempt to describe an ideal society. Although we are more familiar with Western philosophers like Plato and his student Aristotle, Eastern philosophers are also thought about social issues. Until recently, we have very few texts that are non religious in nature that theorize about social life. From 4th century until through the 19th century, the Catholic Church was the seat of power from today's Turkey in the east to northern, western and northern Europe, including the British Isles. Only monks who were charged with rewriting holy text by hand, and the aristocracy were literate. Moreover, the church consolidated power. In the year 800, Pope Leo III named Charlemagne, the King of Francia, Emperor of the Holy Roman Empire, giving one individual control over most of Europe. Doing so gave the Catholic Church the power to maintain its own traditions, safeguard them from the influence of people practicing other religions. If any social patterns challenged any belief of the church, those practitioners were massacred, burned at the stake, or labeled heretics. As a result, the records that we have are extremely subjective and do not offer an unbiased view of social practice. In the 13th century, Ma Tuanlin, a Chinese historian, was the first to record in his seminal encyclopedia titled General Study of Literary Remains the social dynamics underlying and generating historical development. In the 14th century, the Tunisian historian Ibn Khaldun set the foundation for both modern sociology and economics. Khaldun proposed a theory of social conflict and provided a comparison of nomadic and sedentary life, an analysis of political economy, and a study connecting a tribe's social cohesion to its capacity for power. Khaldun often challenged authorities. As sociologists continue to study and report on social issues and problems, they often find themselves in the center of controversy. From 1347 to 1522, the bubonic plague ravaged Europe, killing up to 35% of population. The plague dealt a major blow to the credibility of the Catholic Church. Out of this chaos emerged the work of Copernicus, Galileo, Leonardo, Newton, and Linnaeus, and other philosophers whose work sometimes contradicted church teachings. Events once held to be the product of the divine hand could be analyzed by human reason and observation and could be explained by scientific, testable, and retestable hypotheses. As literacy spread through conquests and colonization, more records and literature became available for sociologists and historians to put social puzzles together. In the 18th century, Enlightenment philosophers developed general principles that could be used to explain social life. Thinkers such as John Locke, Francois-Marie Arouet, that's Voltaire. Oh, I didn't know that. Immanuel Kant and Thomas Hobbes responded to what they saw as social ills by writing on topics that they hoped would lead to social reform. Mary Wollstonecraft wrote about women's conditions in society. Like Harriet Martineau and Jane Addams, her works were long ignored by the male academic structure, but since the 1970s, Wollstonecraft has been widely considered the first feminist thinker of consequence. Ideas about economic systems, the family, health and hygiene, national offense and defense were among the many concerns of social life. The early 19th century saw great changes with the Industrial Revolution, increased mobility, and new kinds of employment. It was also a period of increased trade, travel, and globalization that exposed many people for the first time to societies and cultures other than their own. Millions of people moved into cities, and many people turned away from their traditional religious beliefs. Ideas spread rapidly, groups were created, political decisions became public decisions. Among a new generation of philosophers, there were some who believed they could make sense of it all. Creating a discipline, European theorists. Auguste Comte, 1798 to 1857. The term sociology was first coined in 1780 by the French essayist Emmanuel Joseph Sieyès in an unpublished manuscript. In 1838, the term was reintroduced by Auguste Comte. Comte originally studied to be an engineer, but later became a pupil of social philosopher Claude-Henri de Rouvroy-Comte de Saint-Simon. They have thought that social scientists could study society using the same scientific method utilized in natural sciences. Comte also believed in the potential of social scientists to work toward the betterment of society. He held that once scholars identified the laws that govern society, sociologists could address problems such as poor education and poverty. Comte named the scientific study of social patterns positivism. He describes his philosophy in a series of books called The Course in Positive Philosophy and A General View of Positivism. He believed that revealing the laws by which societies and individuals interacted would usher in a new positivist age of history. While the field and its terminology have grown, sociologists still believe in the positive impact of their work. Harriet Martineau. Harriet Martineau introduced sociology to English-speaking scholars through her translation of Comte's writing from French to English. She was an early analyst of social practices, including economics, social class, religion, suicide, government, and women's rights. Her career began with illustrations of political economy, a work educating ordinary people about the principles of economics. She later developed the first systematic methodological international comparisons of social institutions in two of her most famous sociological works, Society in America and Retrospect of Western Travel. Martineau found the workings of capitalism at odds with the professed moral principles of people in the United States. She pointed out the faults with the free enterprise system in which workers were exploited and impoverished while business owners became wealthy. She further noted that the belief that all are created equal was inconsistent with the lack of women's rights. Much like Mary Wollstonecraft, Martineau was often discounted in her own time because academic sociology was a male dominated profession. Karl Marx, 1818 to 1883. Karl Marx was a German philosopher and economist. In 1848, he and Friedrich Engels co authored the Communist Manifesto. This book is one of the most influential political manuscripts in history. It also presents Marx's theory of society, which differed from what Comte proposed. Marx rejected Comte's positivism. He believed that societies grew and changed as a result of the struggles of different social classes over the means of production. At the time he was developing his theories, the Industrial Revolution and the rise of capitalism led to great disparities in wealth between the owners of the factories and the workers. Capitalism, an economic system characterized by private or corporate ownership of goods and the means to produce them, had developed in many nations. Marx predicted that inequalities of capitalism would become so extreme that workers would eventually revolt. This would lead to the collapse of capitalism, which would be replaced by communism. Communism is an economic system under which there is no private or corporate ownership. Everything is owned communally and distributed as needed. Marx believed that communism was a more equitable system than capitalism. While his economic predictions did not materialize in the time he predicted, Marx's idea that social conflict leads to change in society is still one of the major theories used in modern sociology. Herbert Spencer, 1820 to 1903. In 1873, the English philosopher Herbert Spencer published The Study of Sociology, the first book with the term sociology in the title. Spencer rejected much of Comte's philosophy as well as Marx's theory of class struggle and his support of communism. Instead, he favored a form of government that allowed market forces to control capitalism. His work influenced many early sociologists, including Emile Durkheim. Spencer, using Charles Darwin's work as a comparison, said, "This survival of the fittest, which I have here sought to express in mechanical terms, is that which Mr. Darwin has called natural selection, or the preservation of favored races in the struggle for life." The statement is often misinterpreted and adopted by those who believe in the superiority of one race over the other. George Simmel. George Simmel was a German art critic who wrote widely on social and political issues as well. Simmel took an anti-positivism stance and addressed topics such as social conflict, the function of money, individual entity in city life, and the European fear of outsiders. Much of his work focused on micro-level theories and analyzed the dynamics of two-person and three-person groups. His work also emphasized individual culture as the creative capacities of individuals. Emile Durkheim. Emile Durkheim helped establish sociology as a formal academic discipline by establishing the first European department of sociology at the University of Bordeaux in 1895, by publishing his Rules of Sociological Method in 1895. In Division of Labor in Society, Durkheim further laid out his theory on how societies transformed from a primitive state into a capitalist industrial society. According to Durkheim, people rise to their proper levels in society based on merit. Durkheim believed that sociologists could study objective facts. He also believed that through such studies, it would be possible to determine if a society was healthy or pathological. Healthy societies were stable, while pathological societies experienced a breakdown in social norms. In 1897, Durkheim attempted to demonstrate the effectiveness of his rules of social research when he published a work titled Suicide. Durkheim examined suicide statistics in different police districts to research differences between Catholic and Protestant communities. He attributed the differences to socio-religious forces rather than to individual or psychological causes. Max Weber, 1864 to 1920. Prominent sociologist Max Weber established a sociology department in Germany at the Ludwig Maximilians University of Munich in 1919. Weber wrote on many topics related to sociology, including political change in Russia and social forces that affect factory workers. He is known best for his 1904 book, The Protestant Ethic and the Spirit of Capitalism. The theory that Weber sets forth in this book is still controversial. Some believe that Weber argued that the belief of many Protestants, especially Calvinists, led to the rise of capitalism. Others interpret it as simply claiming that the ideologies of capitalism and Protestantism are complementary. Weber believed that it was difficult, if not impossible, to use standard scientific methods to accurately predict the group behavior of groups, as some sociologists hope to do. Weber argued that the influence of culture on human behavior had to be taken into account. This even applied to the researchers themselves, who should be aware of how their own cultural biases could influence their research. To deal with this problem, Weber and Wilhelm Dilthey introduced the concept of Verstehen, a German word that means to understand in a deep way. In seeking Verstehen, outside observers of a social world, an entire culture, or a small setting attempt to understand it from an insider's point of view. In the nature of social action, Weber describes sociology as striving to interpret the meaning of social action and thereby give a causal explanation of the way in which action proceeds and the effects it produces. He and other like-minded sociologists proposed a philosophy of anti-positivism, whereby social researchers would strive for subjectivity as they work to represent social processes, cultural norms, and societal values. This approach led to some research methods whose aim was not to generalize or predict, but to systematically gain an in-depth understanding of social worlds. The different approaches to research based on positivism or anti-positivism are often considered the foundation for the differences found today between quantitative sociology and qualitative sociology. Quantitative sociology uses statistical methods such as surveys with large numbers of participants. Researchers analyze data using statistical techniques to see if they can uncover patterns of human behavior. Qualitative sociology seeks to understand human behavior by learning about it through in-depth interviews, focus groups, and analysis of content sources. Applying the discipline, American theorists and practitioners. In the early 1900s, sociology reached universities in the United States. William Sumner held the first professorship in sociology. Franklin Giddings was the first full professor of sociology, and Albion Small wrote the first sociology textbook. Early American sociologists tested and applied the theories of the Europeans and became leaders in social research. Lester Ward developed social research methods and argued for the use of the scientific method and quantitative data to show the effectiveness of policies. In order for sociology to gain respectability in American academia, social researchers understood that they must adopt empirical approaches. W.E.B. Du Bois. William Edward Burghardt Du Bois, a Harvard-trained historian, pioneered the use of rigorous empirical methodology into sociology. His groundbreaking 1896-1897 study of the African American community in Philadelphia incorporated hundreds of interviews Du Bois conducted in order to document the familial and employment structures and assess the chief challenges of the community. These new comprehensive research methods stood in stark contrast to the less scientific practices of the time, which Du Bois critiqued as being similar to doing research as if through the window of a moving car. His scientific approach became highly influential to entire schools of sociological study and is considered a forerunner to contemporary practices. Additionally, Dubois' 1889 publication provided empirical evidence to challenge pseudoscientific ideas of biological racism, which had been used as justification to oppress people of different races. Dubois also played a prominent role in the effort to increase rights for black people. Concerns at the slow pace of progress and advice from some black leaders to be more accommodating of racism, Dubois became a leader in what would later be known as the Niagara Movement. In 1905, he and others drafted a declaration that called for the immediate political, economic, and social equality for African Americans. A few years later, he helped found the National Association for the Advancement of Colored People and served as its director of publications. Thorstein Veblen, 1857 to 1929. After a brief stint as an unemployed college graduate, Thorstein Veblen began to study the economy through a social lens, writing about the leisure class, the business class, and other areas that touched on the idea of working itself. He researched the chronically unemployed the currently employed, the working class, and the working classes. I don't think it's supposed to have that in there twice. The working classes and the working classes. That's the same thing. I knew that these had some issues, but that's all right. Jane Addams, 1860 to 1935. Jane Addams founded Hull House, a center that serves needy immigrants through social and educational programs while providing extensive opportunities for sociological research. Founded in Chicago, Addams worked closely with University of Chicago's Chicago School of Sociology. This school of thought places much importance on environment, in which relationships and behaviors develop. Research conducted at Hull House informed child labor, immigration, healthcare, and other areas of public policy. Charles Herbert Cooley, 1864 to 1929. Charles Herbert Cooley posited that individuals compare themselves to others in order to check themselves against social standards and remain part of the group. Calling this idea the looking glass itself, Cooley argued that we see ourselves by the reactions of others with whom we interact. If someone reacts positively to our behavior, theoretically we will continue that behavior. He wrote substantially on what he saw as the order of life in human nature and the social order, followed by social organization in 1909. He was very concerned with the increasing individualism and competitiveness of U.S. society, fearing it would disrupt families as primary groups lost their importance. George Herbert Mead, 1863 to 1931. George Herbert Mead was a philosopher and sociologist whose work focused on the ways in which the mind and the self were developed as a result of social processes. He argued that how an individual comes to view himself or herself is based to a very large extent on interactions with others. Though Mead adopted Cooley's concept of looking glasses, Mead felt that an individual's reaction to a positive or negative reflection depended on who the other was. Individuals that had greatest impact on a person's life were significant others, while generalized others were the organized and generalized attitude of a social group. Mead often shared the title of father of symbolic interactionism with Cooley and Irving Goffman. Robert E. Park, 1864 to 1944. Robert E. Park is best known as the founder of social ecology. Attached to the Chicago School, Park focused on how individuals lived within their environment. One of the first sociologists to focus on ethnic minorities, he wrote on the Belgian oppression of the Congolese. When he returned to the U.S., he and Ernst Burgess researched the inner city to show that no matter who lived there, social chaos was prevalent. As such, it was not the residents who caused the chaos, but the environment. 1.3 Theoretical Perspectives in Sociology. Learning Objectives. By the end of this section, you should be able to describe the ways that sociological theories are used to explain social institutions, differentiate between functionalism, conflict theory, and symbolic interactionism. Sociologists study social events, interactions, and patterns, and they develop theories to explain why things work as they do. In sociology, a theory is a way to explain different aspects of social interactions and to create a testable proposition called the hypothesis about a society. For example, although suicide is generally considered an individual phenomenon, Emil Durkheim was interested in studying the social factors that affect it. He studied social solidarity, social ties within a group, and hypothesized that differences in suicide rates might be explained by religious differences. Durkheim gathered a large amount of data about Europeans and found that Protestants were more likely to commit suicide than Catholics. His work supports the utility of theory in sociological research. Theories vary in scope depending on the scale of the issues that they are meant to explain. Macro-level theories relate to large-scale issues and large groups of people, while micro-level theories look at very specific relationships between individuals or small groups. Grand theories attempt to explain large-scale relationships and answer fundamental questions, such as why societies form and why they change. Sociological theory is constantly evolving and should never be considered complete. Classical sociological theories are still considered important and current, but new sociological theories build upon the work of their predecessors and add to them. In sociology, a few theories provide broad perspectives that help explain many different aspects of social life, and these are called paradigms. Paradigms are philosophical and theoretical frameworks used within a discipline to formulate theories, generalizations, and the experiments performed in support of them. Three paradigms have come to dominate sociological thinking because they provide useful explanations: structural functionalism, conflict theory, and symbolic interactionism. Functionalism. Functionalism, also called structural functional theory, sees society as a structure with interrelated parts designed to meet the biological and social needs of the individuals in that society. Functionalism grew out of the writings of English philosopher and biologist Herbert Spencer, who saw similarities between society and the human body. He argued that just as the various organs of the body work together to keep the body functioning, the various parts of society work together to keep society functioning. The parts of society that Spencer referred to were the social institutions, or patterns of belief and behaviors focused on meeting social needs, such as government, education, family, healthcare, religion, and the economy. Emil Durkheim applied Spencer's theory to explain how societies change and survive over time. Durkheim believed that society is a complex system of interrelated and interdependent parts that work together to maintain stability, and that society is held together by shared values, languages, and symbols. He believed that to study society, a sociologist must look beyond individuals to social facts such as laws, morals, values, religious beliefs, customs, fashion, and rituals, which all serve to govern social life. Alfred Radcliffe Brown defines the function of any recurrent activity as the part it played in social life as a whole, and therefore the contribution it makes to social stability and continuity. In a healthy society, all parts work together to maintain stability, a state called dynamic equilibrium by later sociologists such as Parsons. Durkheim believed that individuals may make up society, but in order to study society, sociologists have to look beyond individuals to social facts. Each of these social facts serve one or more functions within a society. For example, one function of a society's laws may be to protect society from violence, while another is to punish criminal behavior, while another is to preserve public health. Another noted structural functionalist, Robert Merton, pointed out that social processes often have many functions. Manifest functions are the consequences of a social process that are sought or anticipated, while latent functions are the unsought consequences of a social process. A manifest function of a college education, for example, includes gaining knowledge, preparing for a career, and finding a good job that utilizes that education. Latent functions of your college years include meeting new people, participating in extracurricular activities, or even finding a spouse or partner. Another latent function of education is creating a hierarchy of employment based on the level of education attained. Latent functions can be beneficial, neural, or harmful. Social processes that have undesirable consequences for the operation of society are called dysfunctions. In education, examples of dysfunction include getting bad grades, truancy, dropping out, not graduating, and not finding suitable employment. How about having bad teachers? Sorry, I had to say that. Criticism. One criticism of the structural functional theory is that it can't adequately explain social change, even though the functions are processes. Also problematic is the somewhat circular nature of this theory. Repetitive behavior patterns are assumed to have a function, yet we profess to know that they have a function only because they are repeated. Furthermore, dysfunctions may continue, even though they don't serve a function, which seemingly contradicts the basic premise of the theory. Many sociologists now believe that functionalism is no longer useful as a macro level theory, but that it does serve a useful purpose in some mid level analyses. Conflict theory. Conflict theory looks at a society as a competition for limited resources. This perspective is a macro level approach most identified with the writings of German philosopher and sociologist Karl Marx, who saw society as being made up of individuals in different social classes who must compete for social material and political resources such as food and housing, employment, education, and leisure time. Social institutions like government, education, and religion reflect this competition in their inherent inequalities and help maintain the unequal social structure. Some individuals and organizations are able to obtain and keep more resources than others, and these winners use their power and influence to maintain social institutions. The perpetuation of power results in the perpetuation of oppression. Several theorists suggested variations on this basic theme, like Polish-Austrian sociologist Ludwig Gumplowicz, who expanded on Marx's ideas by arguing that war and conquest are the basis of civilizations. He believed that cultural and ethnic conflicts led to states being identified and defined by a dominant group that had power over other groups. German sociologist Max Weber agreed with Marx, but also believed that in addition to economic inequalities, inequalities of political power and social structure caused conflict. Weber noted that different groups were affected differently based on education, race, and gender, and that people's reactions to inequality were moderated by class indifferences and rates of social mobility, as well as by perceptions about the legitimacy of those in power. A reader of Marx, George Simmel, believed that conflict can help integrate and stabilize a society. He said that the intensity of the conflict varies depending on the emotional involvement of the parties, the degree of solidarity within the opposing groups, and the clarity and limited nature of the goals. Simmel also showed that groups work to create internal solidarity, centralize power, and reduce dissent. The stronger the bonds, the weaker the discord. Resolving conflicts can reduce tension and hostility and can pave the way for future agreements. In the 1930s and 1940s, German philosophers known as the Frankfurt School developed critical theory as an elaboration on Marx's principles. Critical theory is an expansion of conflict theory and is broader than just sociology, incorporating other social science and philosophy. A critical theory is a holistic theory and attempts to address structural issues causing inequality. It must explain what's wrong in current social reality, identify the people who can make changes, and provide practical goals for social transformation. More recently, inequality based on gender or race has been explained in a similar manner and has identified institutionalized power structures that help to maintain inequality between groups. Janet Saltzman Chaffetz presented a model of feminist theory that attempts to explain the forces that maintain gender inequality, as well as a theory of how such a system can be changed. Similarly, critical race theory grew out of a critical analysis of race and racism from a legal point of view. Critical race theory looks at structural inequality based on white privilege and associated wealth, power, and prestige. Criticism. Just as structural functionism was criticized for focusing too much on the stability of societies, conflict theory has been criticized because it tends to focus on conflict to the exclusion of recognizing stability. Many social structures are extremely stable or have gradually progressed over time rather than changing abruptly, as conflict theory would suggest. Symbolic interactionist theory. Symbolic interactionism is a micro-level theory that focuses on the relationships among individuals within a society. Communication, the exchange of meaning through language and symbols, is believed to be the way in which people make sense of their social worlds. Theorists Herman and Reynolds note that this perspective sees people as being active in shaping the social world rather than simply being acted upon. George Herbert Mead is considered a founder of symbolic interactionism, though he never published his work on it. Mead's student Herbert Bloomer coins the term symbolic interactionism and outlines these basic premises. Humans interact with things based on meanings ascribed to those things. The ascribed meaning of things comes from our interactions with others in society. The meanings of things are interpreted by a person when dealing with things in specific circumstances. If you love books, for example, a symbolic interactionist might propose that you learn that books are good or important in the interactions you had with family, friends, school, or church. Maybe your family had a special reading time each week. Getting your library card was treated as a special event, or bedtime stories were associated with warmth and comfort. Social scientists who apply symbolic interactionist thinking look for patterns of interaction between individuals. Their studies often involve observation of one-to-one interactions. For example, while a conflict theorist studying a political protest might focus on class difference, a symbolic interactionist would be more interested in how individuals in the protesting group interact, as well as the signs and symbols protesters use to communicate their message. The focus on the importance of symbols in building a society led sociologists like Irving Goffman to develop a technique called dramaturgical analysis. Goffman used theater as an analogy for social interaction and recognized that people's interaction shows patterns of cultural scripts. He argued that individuals were actors in a play. We switched roles, sometimes minute to minute, for example, from student or daughter to dog walker, because it can be unclear what part a person may play in a given situation. He or she has to improvise his or her role as the situation unfolds. I like that. Studies that use symbolic interaction as perspective are more likely to use qualitative research methods, such as in-depth interviews or participant observation, because they seek to understand the symbolic worlds in which research subjects live. Constructivism is an extension of symbolic interactionist theory, which proposes that reality is what humans cognitively construct it to be. We develop social constructs based on interactions with others, and those constructs that last over time are those that have meanings which are widely agreed upon or generally accepted by most within the society. This approach is often used to examine what's defined as deviance within a society. There is no absolute definition of deviance, and different societies have constructed different meanings for deviance, as well as associating different behaviors with deviance. One situation that illustrates this is what you believe you're to do if you find a wallet in the street. If in the United States, turning the wallet into local authorities would be considered the appropriate action, and to keep the wallet would be seen as deviant. In contrast, many European Eastern societies would consider it much more appropriate to keep the wallet and search for the owner yourself. Turning it over to someone else, even the authorities, would be considered deviant behavior. Criticism. Research done from this perspective is often scrutinized because of the difficulty of remaining objective. Others criticize the extremely narrow focus on symbolic interaction. Proponents, of course, consider this one of its greatest strengths. Sociological theory today. These three approaches still provide the main foundation of modern sociological theory, though they have evolved. Structural functionalism was a dominant force after World War II and until the 1960s and 1970s. At that time, sociologists began to feel that structural functionalism did not sufficiently explain the rapid social changes happening in the United States at that time. The women's movement and the civil rights movement forced academics to develop approaches to study these emergent social practices. Conflict theory then gained prominence with its emphasis on institutionalized social inequality. Critical theory and the particular aspects of feminist theory and critical race theory focused on creating social change through the application of sociological principles. The field saw a renewed emphasis on helping ordinary people understand sociology principles in the form of public sociology. Gaining prominence in the wake of Mead's work in the 1920s and 1930s, symbolic interactionism declined in influence during the 1960s and 1970s, only to be revitalized at the turn of the 21st century. Postmodern social theory developed in the 1980s to look at society through an entirely new lens by rejecting previous macro-level attempts to explain social phenomena. Its growth and popularity coincides with the rise of constructivist views of symbolic interactionism. Why study sociology? Learning objectives. Sorry, that's 1.4. Why study sociology? Learning objectives. By the end of this section, you should be able to explain by the end of this section, you should be able to explain why it is worthwhile to study sociology. Identify ways sociology is applied in the real world. When Elizabeth Eckford tried to enter Central High School in Little Rock, Arkansas in September 1957, she was met by an angry crowd and was turned away by authorities. But she knew she had the law on her side. 3 years earlier, in the landmark Brown versus Board of Education decision, the Supreme Court had overturned 21 state laws that allowed black and white people to be taught in separate school systems as long as the school systems were equal. The decision was nothing short of momentous, not only for education, but for a number of other segregation and discrimination issues that have lasted into this decade. And in that momentous decision, the Supreme Court cited the research of the husband and wife team of social scientists Kenneth and Mamie Clark, and evidence that segregation generates in minority students a feeling of inferiority. In the doll test, for example, the Clark showed children 4 dolls, 2 with white skin and yellow hair, and 2 with brown skin and black hair. When asked which doll they preferred, the majority of black children chose the doll with the light skin doll, and they assigned positive characteristics to it. Most of the black children discarded the doll with the brown skin, the one that had a closer resemblance to themselves. When asked to choose the doll that looked like them, many children left the room, started to cry, or became depressed. The Clark's research contributed to the Supreme Court's conclusion that separate but equal was damaging to students, and that separate facilities are unequal. Sociology in a better society. Since it was first founded, many people interested in sociology have been driven by the scholarly desire to contribute knowledge to this field, while others have seen it as a way not only to study society, but also to improve it. Besides desegregation, sociology has played a crucial role in many important social reforms, such as equal opportunity for women in the workplace, improved treatment for individuals with mental handicaps or learning disabilities, increased accessibility and accommodation for people with physical handicaps, the right of native populations to preserve their land and culture, and prison system reforms. The predominant American sociologist, the late Peter L. Berger, in his 1963 book, Invitation to Sociology, A Humanistic Perspective, describes a sociologist as someone concerned with understanding society in a disciplined way. He asserts that sociologists have a natural interest in the monumental moments of people's lives, as well as a fascination with banal, everyday occurrences. Berger also described the aha moment when a sociological theory becomes applicable and understood. There is a deceptive simplicity and obviousness about some sociological investigations. One reads them, nods at the familiar scene, remarks that one has heard all this before, and don't people have better things to do than waste their time on truisms, until one is suddenly brought up against an insight that radically questions everything one has previously assumed about this familiar scene. This is the point at which one begins to sense the excitement of sociology. Sociology can be exciting because it teaches people ways to recognize how they fit into the world and how others perceive them. Looking at themselves and society from a sociological perspective helps people see where they connect to different groups based on the many different ways they classify themselves and how society classifies them in turn. It raises awareness of how those classifications, such as economic and status levels, education, ethnicity, or sexual orientation, affects perceptions. Sociology teaches people not to accept easy explanations. It teaches them a way to organize their thinking so that they can ask better questions and formulate better answers. It makes people more aware that there are many different kinds of people in the world who do not necessarily think the way they do. It increases their willingness and ability to try and see the world from other people's perspectives. This prepares them to live and work in an increasingly diverse and integrated world. Sociology in the workplace. Employers continue to seek people with what are called transferable skills. This means that they want to hire people whose knowledge and education can be applied in a variety of settings and whose skills will contribute to various tasks. Studying sociology can provide people with this wide knowledge and a skill set that can contribute to many workplaces, including an understanding of social systems and large bureaucracies, the ability to devise and carry out research projects to assess whether a program or policy is working, the ability to collect, read, and analyze statistical information from polls or surveys, the ability to recognize important differences in people's social, cultural, and economic backgrounds, skills in preparing reports and communicating complex ideas, and the capacity for critical thinking about social issues and problems that confront modern society. Sociology prepares people for a wide variety of careers. Besides actually conducting social research or training others in the field, people who graduate from college with a degree in sociology are hired by government agencies and corporations in fields such as social services, counseling, community planning, health services, marketing, market research, and human resource. Says, even a small amount of training in sociology can be an asset in careers like sales, public relations, journalism, teaching, law, and criminal justice. Okay? And that is the end of Sociology 1. Cool.